You think this is your house now? Carl's fist connected with my cheekbone, and I heard three distinct electronic chirps, the neighbor's doorbell cameras lighting up in unison. I actually laughed, tasting copper in my mouth, because the deed to 118 Maple Row was burning a hole in my back pocket. What Carl didn't know was that our quiet Ohio neighborhood had rules, evidence, and a small army of justice-minded neighbors who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. The locksmith was already on his way. My name is Lena Hart, and I'm 32 years old. I've spent the last decade building my career as a freelance audio engineer in Northwood, Ohio, a job that sounds more glamorous than it actually is. Most days, I'm hunched over mixing boards in cramped studios or hauling equipment to corporate events, but it pays well enough that 3 years ago, I scraped together a down payment and took out a mortgage on a modest bungalow at 118 Maple Row. The house wasn't much to look at. 1940s construction with original hardwood floors that creaked in all the wrong places, and a kitchen that hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. But it was mine. Every warped floorboard, every stubborn window that needed a special trick to open, every square foot of crabgrass in the backyard. Mine. My mother, Marjorie, had remarried 2 years ago. Carl Benton swept into her life with the kind of confidence that only comes from never having to back it up with actual accomplishments. He was 6'2" with a salesman's smile and hands that had never seen honest work, though he talked constantly about all the businesses he was about to start. Mom fell hard. I kept my mouth shut because I'd seen her lonely for too long after Dad died. When I landed a 4-month contract to design the sound system for a new concert venue in Indianapolis, I made what I thought was a simple decision. The house would sit empty, which seemed wasteful and risky in a neighborhood where copper pipe theft was becoming common. Mom and Carl were between apartments, something about their landlord selling the building. I drew up a basic rental agreement. They could stay from March through June. No rent required. Just keep the place maintained and move out when I returned. "You're such a good daughter," Mom had said, signing the agreement I'd printed from a template online. Carl had barely glanced at it, already eyeing my garage like he'd found treasure. The Indianapolis project ran 2 weeks over schedule. I didn't think much of it. Sent Mom a text saying I'd be back July 15th instead of July 1st. She responded with a heart emoji. But when my Uber pulled up to 118 Maple Row that humid Tuesday afternoon, something was immediately wrong. The front door, my front door, had a different lock, not just rekeyed, but an entirely different deadbolt, brushed nickel instead of the aged brass I'd installed myself. My key didn't fit. I stood there for a full minute, my luggage sweating on the sidewalk beside me, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The house looked different, too. Someone had started building what looked like an illegal addition to the garage. Raw lumber framing extending into what used to be garden space. My mother's wind chimes hung from the porch, but behind them, I could see my living room curtains had been replaced with some gaudy floral pattern. "Lena? Oh, honey, you're back." I turned to find Raina Ortiz, my next-door neighbor, watering her petunias with the expression that was equal parts sympathy and warning. "Mrs. Ortiz, do you know what? Been some changes while you were gone," she said carefully, glancing at my house. "Your stepdad's been busy." The way she said stepdad made my skin crawl. I'd never called Carl that. He was Mom's husband, nothing more. "How long has this been going on?" I gestured at the new lock. "The construction." Raina set down her watering can. "Started about a month ago. First it was just him working in the garage at all hours. Then came the lumber deliveries. Then—" She paused, choosing her words. "Then he started telling people this was his house now. Said you'd agreed to sign it over." The blood drained from my face. He said what? We didn't believe him. "Honey, the Millers, me, everyone on the block knows you worked yourself to the bone for this place." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "But he's been getting aggressive. Yelled at the electrical inspector last week. Told the mailman not to deliver your mail anymore. Said you didn't live here." I pulled out my phone, hands shaking as I called my mother. She answered on the third ring. her voice artificially bright. "Lena, did you make it home safe?" "Mom, I'm locked out of my house. What's going on?" A pause. I heard Carl's voice in the background, low and commanding. "Oh, well, Carl changed the locks for security. You know, after those break-ins over on Elm Street. We'll get you a key made tomorrow." "Mom, you need to let me in. Now. This is my house." "Well, about that." Another pause. Carl's voice got louder, though I couldn't make out the words. "Carl's made so many improvements, honey. The garage is practically a workshop now," he's saying. "He's saying we should talk about making this permanent, like a family home." I stood on my own sidewalk, in front of my own house, feeling like I'd stepped into an alternate dimension. Behind me, I heard the Miller's front door open. Tom Miller, a retired postal worker, gave me a grim nod. "Need us to call anyone, Lena?" he asked, and I understood he meant the police. "Not yet," I said, though my voice shook. "But thank you. Because this was my house, my name on the deed, my mortgage payments for 3 years. And Carl Benton was about to learn that in Northwood, Ohio, property rights meant something, even if I had to teach him that lesson myself. The confrontation came 2 hours later. After Mom's evasive phone call, I'd sat in Raina's kitchen, using her Wi-Fi to pull up every document I had in the cloud: the deed, the mortgage statements, the rental agreement Mom had signed. Raina made me tea while her husband, Miguel, stood watch at their front window. "He's coming out," Miguel announced. I walked back to my property line. Carl emerged from my front door like he owned the place, which apparently he believed he did. He'd filled out since I'd last seen him. Less gym muscle, more beer weight, and wore paint-splattered jeans and one of my father's old work shirts that Mom must have kept. "Lena," he said my name like it tasted bad. "Your mother said you'd be showing up. I need you to unlock my house, Carl." He laughed, actually laughed, and crossed his arms. "See? That's where you're confused. This is a family home now. Marjorie and I have established residency. I've made improvements worth thousands. New electrical in the garage. Foundation work. Even fixed that disaster you called a back deck." "You had no right." "I had every right. Your mother invited me to live here. I've been paying utilities, maintaining the property, under Ohio law. That makes us tenants, and you can't just kick out tenants." He stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath at 4 in the afternoon. "Besides, you abandoned the property, 4 months, no visits, barely any contact." "I was working. Mom signed an agreement to be out by June." Carl waved his hand dismissively. "That paper? Not legally binding. You didn't file it with any court. Didn't have it notarized. It's worthless." I pulled out my phone and showed him the deed I'd downloaded. "This isn't worthless. This is my house. Carl, my name only." His face darkened. "You think you're smart, don't you? College girl with your fancy job." He leaned against my porch railing, my railing, like he was settling in for a long conversation. "But here's what you don't understand. Possession is 9/10 of the law. We're in the house. You're not? You want us out? You'll have to evict us, and that takes months. Meanwhile, I'll be filing for adverse possession based on the improvements I've made. You can't claim adverse possession on property you've lived in for 4 months," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It takes 21 years in Ohio." His smile faltered for a second, then returned meaner. "Maybe, but I can make those months real expensive for you. Legal fees, court costs, and while you're burning through lawyer money, I'll be right here, improving my investment." "Your investment?" "That's right. See, your mother and I are talking to a lawyer too, about common law marriage rights, about the verbal agreement you made to let us stay indefinitely." "That's a lie." "Prove it." He straightened up, towering over me. "Now get off my property before I call the cops for trespassing." The Millers and Raina were all on their porches now, watching. Tom Miller had his phone out, recording. Carl noticed and his jaw tightened. "Mind your business, neighbors," he called out. "This is a family matter." Lena's our neighbor. Raina shot back. Has been for 3 years. You've been here 4 months. Carl took a step toward Raina's yard, and Miguel moved to stand beside his wife. The tension stretched tight enough to snap. My mother appeared in the doorway then, wringing her hands. Please, everyone, let's not make a scene. Lena, honey, just give us a few more weeks to figure things out. Carl's been working so hard on the house. Mom, I said, keeping my voice level. I need you to look at me and tell me the truth. Do you believe this is Carl's house now? She couldn't meet my eyes. He's done so much work, honey. The garage is beautiful now. And the deck. That's not what I asked. She glanced at Carl, then back at me. Marriage is about sharing. Lena, what's mine is his. But this house isn't yours. Mom, it's mine. Carl stepped between us, and she's my wife, which makes her assets my assets. Community property. Ohio isn't a community property state, I said, and property owned before marriage remains separate. You have no claim here. His face went red. You little... He caught himself, glancing at the neighbors' phones. We'll see what the courts say. Meanwhile, we're not going anywhere. You want to stay somewhere tonight? Plenty of hotels downtown. He turned and walked back into my house, pulling my mother with him. The door slammed with a finality that echoed down Maple Row. Tom Miller walked over, showing me his phone. Got the whole thing recorded. Lena, him admitting he changed the locks, claiming the house is his. This is going to help. I nodded, feeling numb. Can you send that to me? Already did. And Lena? He put a hand on my shoulder. We all know whose house that is. Carl Benton's about to learn that Northwood doesn't forget who its real neighbors are. That night, I stayed at a Holiday Inn off Route 42, drafting a formal notice to quit on my laptop. Ohio law required 3 days' notice for tenants without a lease. I'd have it delivered by certified mail in the morning, and hand-deliver a copy myself. Carl wanted to play property law games? Fine, but he'd forgotten one thing. I'd spent 3 years scraping together a down payment, which meant I'd learned to fight for what was mine, and this time, I had the whole neighborhood ready to back me up. 3 days later, I stood at my own front door with the certified mail receipt in one hand and my phone in the other. The notice to quit had been delivered. Carl had signed for it himself. I had the signature confirmation from USPS. Now I was here to hand-deliver the second copy, as my lawyer had advised. The sheriff's office had said they could schedule a standby for next week, but I was just checking the property today, documenting any changes for my attorney. It was 2 p.m. on a Friday. Most of the neighbors were at work, but I'd texted Raina that I was coming by. I saw her curtain move as I walked up my driveway. I knocked on my own door. 3 firm raps that echoed wrong because this wasn't how you knock when you're coming home. Carl yanked the door open so fast I knew he'd been watching through the peephole. His face was flushed, eyes bloodshot. The smell of whiskey wafted out with the air conditioning. You've got some balls coming here, he said. I'm delivering the second copy of the notice to quit. You have 72 hours from Tuesday's certified mail delivery to vacate. I held out the paper. He snatched it from my hand, crumpling it immediately. Already told you, we're not going anywhere. I stayed calm, phone recording in my pocket. That's your choice, but on Monday, we'll be filing for formal eviction proceedings. You think you're so smart. He stepped out onto the porch, forcing me to step back. Your mom told me all about you, how you always thought you were better than everyone. Too good for Northwood, too good for regular people. I need to document the property condition, I said, trying to step around him toward the side yard where I could see the illegal construction. He moved to block me. Not happening. It's my property. I have the right to inspect it. You have shit, he said, shoving me back with one hand on my shoulder. I stumbled but kept my footing. Don't touch me! Or what? He advanced again, and this time I held my ground. You'll call the cops? Go ahead. I'll tell them you're harassing us, that you've been sending threatening messages. I haven't sent you anything but legal notices. Your word against mine. He was close enough now that spit flecked my face when he talked. And I've got Marjorie to back me up. That's when I saw it. Movement in 3 directions. The Miller's garage camera swiveled toward us with a soft mechanical whir. Across the street, the Johnsons' doorbell cam lit up blue, and Raina's new security system, the one she'd installed last month, had its red recording light blinking steadily. "Carl," I said, loud enough for the cameras to pick up clearly, "I am asking you to step back. You're intimidating me on my own property." "Intimidating?" He laughed, ugly and sharp. "You haven't seen intimidating." His fist came up fast, not a wild swing, but a short, vicious jab that caught my left cheekbone. The impact spun me sideways, and I went down on one knee on my own front walkway. The taste of copper filled my mouth immediately. For a second, everything was quiet except for the ringing in my ear. Then I heard it. Doors opening all around us. Raina's voice calling out, "I'm calling 911. Tom Miller's heavier footsteps coming down his driveway. Carl stood over me, fist still clenched. "Get up and get out, or there's more where that came from." I pulled out my phone with shaking fingers, my face already swelling. 911? What's your emergency?" "This is Lena Hart, at 118 Maple Row in Northwood. I've just been assaulted by Carl Benton on my property. I need police and medical assistance." Carl's face went white. He looked around at the gathering neighbors, at the cameras, at Tom Miller already on his own phone, presumably also calling 911. "She fell," Carl said loudly. "Everyone saw it. She tripped and fell." "I have it on video," Raina called out, holding up her phone. "The whole thing, including the punch." Miguel had come out too, and the Johnsons across the street, even old Mrs. Patterson from 2 houses down was on her porch with her walker. "You're all conspiring against me," Carl shouted. "This is a setup." My mother appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Carl, what did you— Oh my God, Lena, your face." "Get inside, Marjorie," Carl snapped. But Mom was staring at me, at the blood dripping from my mouth onto the sidewalk I'd shoveled every winter for 3 years. Something shifted in her expression. "You hit her," she said, voice small. "You hit my daughter. She came here starting trouble." "You hit my daughter," Mom repeated, louder this time. The sirens were getting closer. Carl looked between all of us, me on the ground, the semicircle of neighbors with their phones out, my mother backing away from him with horror on her face. "This isn't over," he said to me, then turned and stormed back into my house, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Tom Miller reached me first, helping me to my feet. "Don't touch your face," he said. "Let the EMTs document everything first." Raina brought me a bag of frozen peas wrapped in a clean dish towel. "We got it all, honey, every second, 3 different angles." I held the ice to my cheek, tasting blood, feeling my eye already swelling shut. But underneath the pain and shock, something else was building. Not satisfaction. There was nothing satisfying about being punched in the face, but clarity, absolute clarity. Carl Benton had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and he'd done it in front of the best neighborhood watch in Northwood. The police cruiser turned onto Maple Row, followed by an ambulance. As the EMT examined my face and the officer took statements, I saw my mother slip out the back door and disappear down the alley. She didn't come back. Carl was about to learn that in Ohio, assault and battery came with consequences, and those consequences were about to include a restraining order that would keep him away from both me and my property. The EMT shone a light in my eyes. "Possible mild concussion. We should take you in for x-rays." I nodded, then looked at Officer Davidson, who I'd known since high school. "I want to press charges," I said clearly. "Full charges, and I have video evidence from multiple sources." Davidson nodded, looking at the house. "We'll need to take him in for questioning. Is he inside?" "Yes, and officer?" I pulled out my phone, showing him the deed. "This is my house. He's a guest who was served an eviction notice 3 days ago. I want that on record. The law was about to knock on Carl's door, and this time, he wouldn't be the one deciding who got to come in. The emergency room released me after 4 hours with a diagnosis of facial contusion and a mild concussion. No fractures, thankfully, but the left side of my face looked like I'd gone 10 rounds with a heavyweight. The nurse took photographs for evidence before I left. By the time I got back to my hotel room, I had 17 missed calls from my mother and 3 from numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored Mom's calls, but listened to the other voicemails. 2 were from neighbors checking on me. The third was from a lawyer named Sandra Huang from Harrow and Pine, a real estate law firm in downtown Northwood. Miss Hart, I heard about your situation from Tom Miller. He's my former neighbor. I specialize in property disputes and unlawful detainer cases. Given what happened today, I'd like to offer you a consultation first thing Monday morning. No charge. Time is essential in these matters. I called her back immediately. Sandra answered on the second ring and spent 40 minutes walking me through my options. By the time we hung up, I had a Monday morning appointment and a clear action plan. The weekend passed in a blur of ice packs and documentation. I compiled everything: the deed, mortgage statements, the rental agreement, bank records showing every payment I'd made, property tax receipts, insurance policies. Tom Miller created a shared folder where all the neighbors could upload their video evidence. By Sunday night, we had 6 different angles of the assault, plus weeks of footage showing Carl's illegal construction and aggressive behavior. Monday morning, I sat in Sandra Huang's office with my face still purple, but my resolve solid. She reviewed everything with the efficiency of someone who'd seen every dirty trick in the book. "The assault gives us leverage," she said, adjusting her glasses. "We'll file for an emergency protective order today. Once granted, Carl won't be able to come within 500 feet of you or the property. That effectively forces him out immediately." "What about my mom?" "She's not named in the order unless you want her to be." I thought about Mom's face when she saw what Carl had done. "No, just Carl." "Good. Now, simultaneously, we're filing an unlawful detainer action. The 3-day notice expired yesterday, so we can proceed. We're also going to report the unpermitted construction to the city building department." "Won't that get me in trouble? It's my property." Sandra smiled. "No, because you'll be the one reporting it. You were out of town, discovered unauthorized construction upon return, and immediately reported it. You're the victim here, not the violator. Carl will be liable for any fines and removal costs." We spent 3 hours preparing documents. The temporary protective order request included the medical reports, police reports, and sworn statements from 5 neighbors. The unlawful detainer filing was straightforward. They were guests who'd overstayed, period. Sandra also prepared a demand letter for damages to the property. By 2 p.m., everything was filed. The judge granted the emergency protective order immediately, scheduling a full hearing for the following week. The unlawful detainer would take longer, but with the protective order in place, Carl had to leave anyway. Tuesday morning, I met Officer Davidson and a locksmith at my house. Carl's truck was gone, but Mom's sedan was still in the driveway. Davidson knocked, announced himself, and served the protective order. Carl answered the door in yesterday's clothes, looking haggard. His face went from confused to furious as he read the order. "This is bullshit," he spat. "She attacked me." "Sir, you have 1 hour to gather essential belongings," Davidson said calmly. "After that, you need to vacate the premises and remain at least 500 feet away. My tools are in the garage, my work materials. Essential personal belongings only, clothing, medications, documents. Your tools will be returned after the property dispute is resolved." While Carl packed, I walked through my house with the locksmith, documenting everything. The damage was worse than I'd imagined. Holes in walls where he'd run illegal electrical lines. My hardwood floors scratched and stained. The garage turned into a workshop with industrial equipment bolted to my foundation. My mother sat at the kitchen table, not meeting my eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Are you leaving with him?" She nodded. "I have to. He's my husband." He assaulted me, Mom. You don't understand him like I do. He's just frustrated. He thought. She stopped herself. He thought he could steal my house. She flinched. It wasn't like that. He just wanted us to be a family. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that would reach her through whatever Carl had built in her mind. Within the hour, Carl loaded 2 suitcases into his truck. He stood at the property line, exactly 500 feet away according to Davidson's measurement, and shouted, "This isn't over. That house has $30,000 of my improvements in it." "Keep moving, mister," Benton, Davidson said. As Carl's truck disappeared, the locksmith began changing every lock. The neighbors emerged one by one, Raina with cookies, Tom with his toolbox, the Johnsons with a list of contractors they recommended. That afternoon, the city building inspector arrived. Sandra had been right. Presenting myself as the victim who discovered unauthorized construction worked perfectly. The inspector, a thorough man named Richard Torrey, spent 2 hours documenting violations. Unpermitted addition to the garage. He listed, illegal electrical work. This is a fire hazard. Deck construction without permits or proper foundation. Setback violations. He looked up from his clipboard. "Miss Hart, none of this meets code. It all has to come down." "How much will that cost?" "To remove and restore? Maybe $15,000 minimum. Plus fines for the unpermitted work. That's another $5,000 at least." "Who's responsible for paying?" "Whoever did the work. You have documentation that you were out of town?" I showed him my work contract, plane tickets, and hotel receipts from Indianapolis. He nodded. "Then this is on Mr. Benton. We'll send the violation notices to his last known address. If he doesn't pay, liens can be placed against any assets he has." As Torrey posted the red violation notices on my door, I felt something shift. The weight that had been crushing me since Tuesday began to lift. My house was mine again. The law was on my side, and Carl's own aggressive stupidity had given me every tool I needed to keep him away. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in 4 months. The house still smelled wrong, like Carl's cigarettes and cheap cologne. But underneath, I could detect the familiar scent of home. The wooden floors my father had helped me refinish, the paint I'd chosen for each room, the bones of the life I'd built for myself. Tomorrow, Sandra would file for damages, the criminal case for assault would proceed, and piece by piece, I'd reclaim what was mine. But tonight, I just lay in my own bed, in my own house, listening to the familiar creaks and settling sounds that had sung me to sleep for 3 years. Carl had made his play. Now it was my turn. The Maple Row Neighborhood Watch WhatsApp group started the night I got my house back. Raina created it, adding me and 14 other households within a 2-block radius. The group description read, "Supporting our neighbors and keeping our community safe." What it really meant was, we're going to bury Carl Benton in evidence. The first message came from Tom Miller at 6 a.m. Wednesday. Found my security footage from May 12th. Carl threatening the FedEx driver for trespassing when delivering Lena's packages. Then the floodgates opened. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly widow with the walker, turned out to have a Ring doorbell her grandson installed. She'd captured Carl dumping construction debris in her trash cans at 2 a.m. multiple times. "I thought it was raccoons," she typed, but my grandson showed me how to check the recordings. The Johnsons had footage of Carl backing his truck into their mailbox, then driving away without leaving a note. Their teenage son, Marcus, had even more. I've got him on my skateboarding videos from June yelling at kids for riding on the sidewalk, called us delinquents, and threatened to call the cops. But Raina was the real archivist. She'd been documenting everything in what she called her neighborhood journal, a habit from her 30 years as a court reporter. "Come over." She messaged me privately. "You need to see this." I walked next door to find Raina's dining table covered in printed screenshots, photos, and handwritten notes in chronological order. May 3rd, she began, pointing to the first entry. Carl starts construction at 6 a.m., City noise ordinance prohibits construction before 7 a.m. She had a photo timestamped from her kitchen window. May 15th. Carl tells the mailman that Lena Hart doesn't live here anymore. She played an audio recording from her porch camera. Carl's voice was clear. Forward her mail elsewhere. This is the Benton residence now. May 22nd. Confrontation with Eddie's Electric. This was a video. Eddie Ramirez, a local electrician, standing in my driveway while Carl shouted at him. "You can't do permitted work here," Carl was saying. "I'm handling all improvements myself." Eddie's voice on the recording. "Sir, unpermitted electrical work is illegal and dangerous." Carl's response, "Get off my property before I make you." Eddie left and called the city, Raina explained. But when the inspector came, Carl sweet-talked them, said it was a misunderstanding. Page after page, video after video, Carl parking in front of fire hydrants, Carl threatening Tom's teenage daughter for parking too close to my driveway, Carl trying to cut down the maple tree on the property line between my house and Raina's, claiming it was diseased when it was perfectly healthy. "This one's my favorite," Raina said, pulling up a video from July 4th. He tried to charge the Martinez family for using his street for their block party. The Martinezes lived 6 houses down and had been hosting 4th of July parties for 15 years, in the video. Carl stood in the middle of the street, blocking their tables, demanding a venue fee for using the street in front of my house. Roberto Martinez, a soft-spoken accountant, had simply walked away and called the police. Carl retreated when he heard sirens. "But here's what you really need," Raina said, opening a new folder on her laptop. The construction crew. She had photos of 3 different trucks that had delivered materials to my house, license plates visible, company names on the doors. Miguel called them all. 2 said Carl never paid them. 1 is filing a mechanic's lien against the property. Against my property? Don't worry, your lawyer can handle that. The point is, Carl owes Northwood Lumber $3,200, Pioneer Building Supply $1,800, and Thompson Concrete $2,400. They're all willing to testify that he claimed to own the house. The WhatsApp group kept pinging. The Nguyens from the corner house had caught Carl siphoning gas from their car one night. The new couple in 114 had him on video taking packages from their porch, packages addressed to me that had been misdelivered. "This is overwhelming," I said, scrolling through message after message. "That's the point," Tom said. He'd walked over and was standing in Raina's doorway. "My daughter's studying pre-law at Ohio State. She says cases are won by preponderance of evidence. Well, we're going to preponder the hell out of Carl Benton." Tom's daughter, Jessica, had created a shared Google Drive with folders organized by date and type of incident: assault, theft, fraud, property damage, harassment, noise violations, building code violations, threats. "I'm organizing everything with timestamps and descriptions," Jessica explained over speakerphone. "Each piece of evidence has a chain of custody note: who recorded it, when, where it was stored. Mom's paralegal training is finally useful." Her mother, Ann Miller, laughed in the background. 20 years at Franklin County Courthouse taught me that judges love organized evidence. By Thursday, we had 147 separate pieces of documentation spanning Carl's entire 4-month occupation of my house. Sandra Huang was ecstatic when I brought her the drive. "This is," she paused, scrolling through the folders. "This is remarkable. Your neighbors built a better case than most professional investigators." "They're very motivated," I said. "I can see that. This changes things. We're not just defending your property rights anymore. We're showing a pattern of fraud, intimidation, and criminal behavior. Carl didn't just assault you, he terrorized an entire neighborhood." She pulled up the video of Carl claiming the house was his to the lumber company. "This is fraud. He obtained goods under false pretenses." Then the mail interference recordings. Federal crime. The package theft. Another felony. What does this mean for the case? It means Carl Benton is about to face a lot more than eviction. The civil case just became the least of his problems. Has he contacted you at all? No, but Mom called 6 times yesterday. Don't answer. Any communication goes through me now. She looked at the evidence again. Your neighbors did something else, too. They proved community standards. Carl tried to claim he belonged there, that he was improving the neighborhood. This shows the opposite. The established community rejecting an aggressive interloper. That evening, the WhatsApp group had grown to include 23 households. Someone had started a spreadsheet tracking Carl's sightings to ensure he wasn't violating the protective order. Others coordinated patrol schedules, checking on my house when I was at work. Mrs. Patterson summed it up best in her message to the group. That man messed with the wrong neighborhood. Maple Row has been here since 1947. We survived the '74 tornado, the '08 recession, and that developer who wanted to tear us down for condos, Carl Benton, he's just a speed bump. Roberto Martinez added, My grandfather used to say, the eyes of the neighborhood are always watching. Carl thought he was smart, but he forgot. We're all each other's witnesses. As I sat in my reclaimed living room that night, my phone constantly lighting up with new messages of support and evidence, I realized something. Carl had tried to steal more than just my house. He'd tried to steal my place in this community. But communities like Maple Row have long memories and loyal hearts. And they'd just proven that the real deed to a home isn't just about property lines and legal documents. It's about the neighbors who stand witness to your life, who document the truth, and who show up when someone tries to take what's yours. Carl was about to learn that when you attack one house on Maple Row, you attack them all. The preliminary hearing for the protective order was scheduled for Friday morning at 9 a.m. Sandra had warned me that Carl would likely appear with his own lawyer, trying to paint himself as the victim. She was right. Carl showed up in an ill-fitting suit with attorney Dennis Kravick, a bottom feeder known for taking any case if the check cleared. My mother sat behind them, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Judge Patricia Thornton presided, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd seen every sob story and manipulation in the book. Sandra had smiled when we drew her name. She doesn't tolerate theatrics, she'd said. Carl's strategy became clear immediately. Kravick argued that I'd abandoned the property, that Carl had invested thousands in improvements, and that the minor altercation was provoked by my aggressive attempt to break into the house. Your Honor, Kravick said, Mr. Benton has receipts for over $30,000 in improvements. He believed he had an agreement with Miss Hart's mother, his wife, to purchase the property through sweat equity. Judge Thornton looked over her glasses. Do you have this agreement in writing? It was verbal, Your Honor, but... I see. Continue. Sandra stood up. Your Honor, we have video evidence of the assault from multiple angles, medical records, and police reports. We also have something else that speaks to Mr. Benton's credibility. She handed the clerk a folder. Exhibit A through F. Mr. Benton has been advertising items for sale from Miss Hart's property on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. My heart jumped. This was new. Sandra hadn't told me about this. The judge examined the printouts. Carl's face was going pale. Mr. Benton, the judge said, these appear to be listings for an air compressor, a table saw, and various tools, posted yesterday, after the protective order was issued. The location listed is 118 Maple Row. Those are my tools, Carl protested. Then why? Sandra continued, pulling out another document. Do we have receipts showing these exact items, with matching serial numbers, were purchased by Miss Hart in 2022? The air compressor alone has a VIN that matches Miss Hart's Home Depot receipt. She'd found them. Carl had gotten greedy and stupid, trying to sell my tools that I'd bought for home repairs, and he'd photographed the serial numbers to show they were like new. Furthermore, Sandra added, Mr. Benton listed these items as located at my house on Maple Row. Even after being ordered to stay away, he's still claiming ownership of Miss Hart's property. Kravick tried to object, But Carl made it worse. He stood up, ignoring his lawyer's attempt to pull him down. "That house should be mine," he shouted. "I fixed everything she neglected. The garage was a disaster. The deck was rotting." "Mr. Benton," Judge Thornton's voice cut like ice, "you'll speak only through your attorney. She owes me for the improvements. Her mother promised—" "Mr. Benton, sit down or I'll hold you in contempt." Carl sat, but the damage was done. His outburst had shown exactly who he was. Sandra presented the rest of our evidence methodically. The assault videos from 3 angles, the medical reports, the neighbors' statements about Carl's aggressive behavior, the building inspector's report on illegal construction. "Your Honor," Sandra concluded, "Mr. Benton has shown a pattern of violence, fraud, and refusal to acknowledge Miss Hart's property rights, even after being ordered to stay away. He's attempting to profit from selling her belongings. We request the protective order be extended for the maximum duration." Judge Thornton didn't deliberate long. "Mr. Benton," she said, "I've reviewed the evidence, and I find it deeply troubling. Video evidence clearly shows you assaulting Miss Hart on her property. Your claim to ownership is not supported by any documentation. Your improvements were done without permits and against city code." She signed the order. "The protective order is extended for 2 years. You are to remain at least 500 feet from Miss Hart and her property. Any violation will result in immediate arrest." "But my tools," Carl started. "Any items you claim are yours can be retrieved through a civil process, with law enforcement supervision, after providing proof of ownership. The listings you posted yesterday suggest you're attempting to convert Miss Hart's property for your own gain. I strongly advise you to cease such activities immediately." She turned to the criminal case. "As for the assault charges, that will proceed separately. Mr. Benton, you're currently out on bail. I see here there's also a federal mail fraud investigation." My jaw dropped. Sandra hadn't mentioned that either. The prosecutor, who'd been sitting quietly, stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. The Postal Service is investigating Mr. Benton's interference with Miss Hart's mail and packages. Additionally, there are fraud charges pending related to obtaining construction materials under false pretenses." Carl's face went from pale to gray. "Your Honor," Kravik said desperately, "my client has nowhere to go. His wife's daughter has taken their residence." "Counsel," Judge Thornton interrupted, "your client has no claim to that residence, and given the evidence I've seen, he's fortunate he's not in custody right now." She looked at Carl. "Mr. Benton, you have significant legal problems ahead of you. I suggest you focus on those rather than harassing Miss Hart further." Court was adjourned. Carl stormed out with Kravik trailing behind. My mother followed, but stopped at the door and looked back at me. For a moment, I thought she might say something. Then she left. In the hallway, Sandra was practically glowing. The tool listings were a gift. He posted them from his phone, which geotagged them at a motel just outside the 500-foot boundary. He was literally skirting the edge of the protective order while committing fraud. "How did you find them?" "Jessica Miller. She's been monitoring local selling sites in case Carl tried to offload stolen goods. Found the listings this morning at 3 a.m. We walked out into the bright Friday morning. Across the street, I saw Tom and Raina waiting by Tom's car. They'd come to support me. "How'd it go?" Raina called. 2-year protective order," I said, "and apparently federal charges are coming." Tom whistled. "Federal? For Carl?" "Mail fraud," Sandra explained. "Interfering with U.S. mail is a federal crime, plus the construction fraud charges. He's looking at serious time." As we stood there on the courthouse steps, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but I recognized the area code. It was from my mom's sister in Indiana. "Marjorie is here." It read, "She finally left him. Thought you should know." I put my phone away. Maybe someday Mom and I would talk about all this. But not today. Today was about winning the first battle in what I knew would be a longer war. "What's next?" I asked Sandra. "Next, we file the civil suit for damages. With today's ruling and the criminal charges, Carl's going to have a hard time fighting it. But honestly, she smiled, I think Mr. Benton is about to have bigger problems than a civil lawsuit. She was right. Carl had played his hand. Intimidation, violence, fraud, and lost. The law had finally caught up with him, and it had brought federal friends. As we drove back to Maple Row, I thought about the irony. Carl had wanted my house so badly, he'd been willing to steal it. Now, if the federal charges stuck, his next residence would be provided by the government, just not the way he'd planned. The morning of the sheriff's lockout enforcement arrived 2 weeks later, July 30th, a Tuesday that would become legendary on Maple Row. The civil eviction case had proceeded quickly given Carl's absence from the property and the standing protective order, but Sandra had warned me Carl might show up despite the restraining order, desperate enough to risk arrest. By 8 a.m., the neighbors had assembled. Not officially. Everyone just happened to be doing yard work, washing cars, or drinking coffee on their porches. Mrs. Patterson had even dragged a lawn chair to her front yard with her knitting. The Maple Row WhatsApp group had been pinging since dawn. Sheriff's here. Tom messaged at 8:47 a.m. 2 cruisers pulled up, followed by a locksmith van. Deputy Morrison, whom I'd gone to high school with, nodded at me. Miss Hart, we're here to enforce the eviction order and ensure you regain full possession of your property. Is he coming? I asked. We haven't notified him of the exact time, as per protocol, but Morrison glanced around at the obvious neighborhood watch. Word travels. It traveled fast. At 9:15, Carl's truck screeched around the corner, stopping just past the 500-foot mark. He got out, phone in hand, already recording. "This is theft," he shouted, voice carrying down the street. "That's my house, my improvements." Morrison stepped forward. "Mr. Benton, you need to maintain the court-ordered distance. I want my tools, my property. Any property claims need to go through the civil court. Sir, you cannot approach the premises." Carl paced at the boundary line like a caged animal while the locksmith worked. Every lock was being changed. Front door, back door, garage, even the shed I'd forgotten I had. That's when Carl made his fatal mistake. "Marjorie," he yelled, spotting my mother getting out of an Uber halfway down the block. Tell them about our agreement." Mom froze. She was carrying a single box, probably items she'd left behind. Our eyes met across the distance, and I saw something broken in her expression. "Tell them you promised me the house," Carl continued. "Tell them about the investment." Morrison looked at my mother. "Ma'am, do you need to be here?" "I'm just getting my belongings," she said quietly. "My daughter said I could." "Marjorie!" Carl's voice cracked with rage. "Don't you dare abandon me!" He started moving toward her, crossing into the 500-foot boundary. 3 things happened simultaneously. Morrison's hand went to his radio, Tom Miller started recording, and every Ring doorbell on the street lit up. "Mr. Benton, stop right there," Morrison commanded. But Carl was beyond reasoning. He stormed past the deputy, heading straight for my mother. "You lying bitch! You said—" He didn't get to finish. Morrison and his partner moved fast, but Raina's husband Miguel moved faster. The former Marine stepped between Carl and my mother just as Carl raised his hand. "Touch her and you'll need more than cops," Miguel said calmly. Carl swung at Miguel instead. Another stupid mistake. Miguel sidestepped. Carl stumbled, and Morrison had him on the ground in seconds. The cuffs clicked with a finality that echoed down the street. "Carl Benton, you're under arrest for violating a protective order and attempted assault," Morrison said, reading him his rights. "This is a setup," Carl screamed, face pressed against the asphalt. "They're all conspiring. Check their phones. They planned this." "Mrs." Patterson called out from her lawn chair. "Nobody planned for you to be an idiot, son. You did that all by yourself." The arrest was efficient. Carl was in the cruiser within minutes, still ranting about conspiracies and stolen property. But something else was happening. As they drove Carl away, my mother walked slowly up to me, carrying her box. "I filed for divorce yesterday," she said simply. "I should have listened to you." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to comfort her. Part was still angry. "There's something else," she continued, setting down the box. "Carl doesn't know, but I recorded him 3 weeks ago when he was drunk. He was bragging about his plan." She pulled out her phone, found a voice memo, and played it. Carl's slurred voice filled the space between us. "Soon as the divorce is final, I'll own half that house, community property, doesn't matter whose name is on what. Then I'll force a sale, take my half, plus get paid for all my improvements, probably clear 60, 70 grand. Lena thinks she's so smart, but I've been playing the long game." The recording continued with Carl detailing how he'd been documenting his improvements to inflate their value, how he'd gotten contractors to write estimates for work he never intended to finish. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" I asked. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "I was scared and ashamed, and I thought maybe I could fix it myself." She handed me the phone. "The recording is yours. Do whatever you need to do." Sandra later called it the nuclear evidence. Carl had admitted to fraud, conspiracy, and malicious intent. Combined with everything else, it destroyed any possible defense he might have mounted. The locksmith finished his work and handed me a full set of new keys. 6 keys for my house, all mine, all secure. The neighbors began dispersing, but not before each one stopped to congratulate me. The Millers, the Johnsons, the Nguyen's, the Martinez family, even the new couple from 114. "Maple Row takes care of its own," Roberto Martinez said, shaking my hand. Mrs. Patterson was the last to leave, slowly making her way back with her walker. "Your grandmother would be proud," she said. I didn't know she had known my grandmother, but apparently, Maple Row's memory went back further than I'd realized. That afternoon, the building inspector arrived with a demolition crew. Carl's illegal additions came down in 3 hours. The deck he'd built wrong, the dangerous electrical work, the garage expansion that violated setback rules, all of it reduced to debris and hauled away. The city would bill Carl for the full cost, though Sandra doubted he'd ever pay. By sunset, my house looked wounded but free, gaps where Carl had torn into walls, scars on the floors, the garage empty of his equipment but full of holes where he'd bolted things down. It would take months and money I didn't have to repair it all. But as I stood on my own porch with my new keys, watching the sun set over Maple Row, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Carl was in custody, facing federal charges that would likely keep him busy for years. Mom was finally free of him, though our relationship would need its own reconstruction. And my house, battered but unbroken, was mine again. Tom Miller walked over with a beer, handed it to me without a word. We stood there watching the street return to normal. Kids riding bikes, couples walking dogs, the ordinary rhythm of a neighborhood that had briefly gone to war and won. "Hell of a thing," Tom finally said. "Yeah. You need help with repairs. You let us know. Miguel's brother is a contractor. He'll give you a fair price." I nodded, too emotional to speak. "And Lena," Tom added, "Carl's never coming back to Maple Row. We'll make sure of that." As if to prove his point, 3 porch lights flicked on simultaneously. The Millers, Reynas, and Mrs. Pattersons, a silent signal that Maple Row was watching, had always been watching, and would never stop. Carl had wanted my house. Instead, he'd gotten himself a federal case in a neighborhood full of enemies with cameras. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you plan. It's what happens when someone underestimates the power of community and the weight of their own stupidity. The morning after Carl's arrest, I woke to the sound of power tools. Not the harsh, aggressive noise Carl used to make at dawn, but something purposeful and steady. I looked out my bedroom window to find Miguel and 3 other men removing the remains of Carl's botched deck. "You didn't hire us," Miguel said when I rushed outside. "This is what neighbors do." Over the next 3 days, Maple Row transformed into something from a barn-raising documentary. Tom Miller and his daughter Jessica cataloged every repair needed. The Johnsons, both accountants, created a spreadsheet tracking donated materials and labor. Roberto Martinez's brother-in-law, an electrician, fixed Carl's dangerous wiring for the cost of materials only. "Your insurance should cover this," he said, since it was vandalism, technically. He was right. State Farm, armed with our mountain of evidence, classified Carl's damage as vandalism and cut a check within 2 weeks. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it was a start. Mrs. Patterson, it turned out, had been the neighborhood's unofficial historian for 40 years. She brought over a photo album one evening, showing me pictures of my house through the decades. "Your grandmother lived here in the 60s, she revealed, pointing to a black and white photo of a woman who looked startlingly like me standing on my porch. "Before she moved to Cleveland, this house has good bones, dear. It survived worse than Carl Benton." The criminal case moved swiftly. Carl, unable to make bail on the federal charges, took a plea deal. 18 months for mail fraud, 6 months for assault, sentences to run concurrently. He'd also have to pay restitution, though Sandra warned me I'd likely never see a dime. "He's broke," she said simply. "The construction companies are ahead of you in line for damages, and there's nothing to collect anyway." I didn't care about the money. I cared that he was gone. Mom and I met for coffee in September, after her divorce was finalized. She looked older, but somehow lighter, like she'd set down a weight she'd been carrying too long. "I know sorry isn't enough," she said. "I chose him over you. I let him convince me that—" She stopped, started again. "I was lonely and stupid, and I nearly cost you everything." "You were manipulated," I said, surprising myself with the lack of anger in my voice. Carl was good at that. We weren't okay yet, might never be fully okay, but it was a beginning. The surprise came in October. A letter arrived from a law firm in Columbus, informing me that Carl's mother had passed away 6 months ago, leaving her estate in trust. Carl was the beneficiary, but with specific conditions. The money could only be used for restitution and damages from any legal proceedings. She knew what he was, the lawyer explained over the phone. She set this up years ago, worried about the people he might hurt. The trust paid out $47,000 to various creditors and victims. I received $12,000, enough to finish the repairs and then some. The contractors Carl had stiffed got paid. Even the Nguyen's got compensated for their stolen gas. By Thanksgiving, my house was whole again, better than before. Actually, the neighbors' repairs had updated things Carl had actually damaged. New electrical throughout, proper foundation work in the garage, a deck built to code with a 10-year warranty. The Saturday after Thanksgiving, Maple Row held its first official block party in 5 years. Officially, it was just a holiday gathering. Unofficially, everyone knew it was a victory celebration. I stood in my front yard, watching kids run through sprinklers despite the cool weather, while adults shared food and stories. The Millers had set up a project screen to show a highlight reel Jessica had created. Carl's greatest hits of stupidity caught on camera, set to yakety sax. We laughed until we cried. "You know," Raina said, standing beside me with a plate of her famous tamales. "This whole thing brought us together. We'd gotten lazy, keeping to ourselves. Carl reminded us why we need each other." She was right. The Maple Row WhatsApp group remained active, but now it shared more than security footage. Birthday announcements, babysitting offers, tool lending, recipe swaps. We'd become what we'd always pretended to be, a real community. As the party wound down, I stood on my porch, holding the new keys that had become worn smooth from use. The street looked exactly as it had the day I'd first viewed the house 4 years ago. Quiet, tree-lined, unremarkable. But I knew better now. Beneath the suburban ordinary ran currents of loyalty and protection that Carl had never imagined. He'd thought he was stealing a house. Instead, he'd awakened something far more dangerous. Neighbors who gave a damn. Mrs., Patterson summed it up best as she headed home with her walker. That fool brought a scam to a neighborhood fight. 6 months later, a new family moved into the rental house where Mom and Carl had lived before. Young couple, 2 kids, nervous about fitting in. The whole street showed up to help them move in. Sharing the story of Carl Benton as a cautionary tale and a promise, Maple Row protects its own. My house stands solid now, every repair a reminder not of Carl's violence but of my neighbor's response to it. Sometimes I catch myself checking the locks twice before bed, a habit I'll probably never shake. But then I remember the nightlights that flickered on in solidarity, the cameras that bore witness, the community that stood guard. Carl wanted to steal my house. Instead, he gave me something worth far more, proof that I'd chosen the right place to build my life, surrounded by people who'd fight alongside me to protect it. The deed to 118 Maple Row still sits in my fire safe, my name typed clearly on the crisp paper, but the real proof of ownership isn't in that document. It's in every wave from a neighbor, every borrowed tool, every shared meal, every porch light that turns on when someone walks down our street at night. This is my house. This is my street. And as Carl learned the hard way, you don't mess with Maple Row. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about standing up for what's yours. Have you ever had to fight for your home or deal with someone who wouldn't take no for an answer? Let me know in the comments below.